Welcome to the Code Maven channel. My name is Gabor Sabu, and we haven't had a video for a long time because I was trying to think about how to create a code reading video, and I always just messed it up because it was too difficult for me. And finally I found a new direction and a module, a really small and cute module that I could look at, and that's what we are going to do now. So you're looking at the website of MetaCpan, and specifically at the module list GroupBy, which is a relatively new, it's a new and a small module that what it does, it takes an array basically, or a list of references to hashes. So this is going to be like the input. Okay, this is an array, and then these are the hashes, key value pairs, and converts them into hash of hashes of arrays. So groups them together by various keys. So in this case, the output, so if we code the group by with these keys, surname and first name, on this, well, it's called list, but it's currently it's an array, but it could be any thing that returns a list of these references. It will create hash that looks like this. So it will return a hash. So you can see that the blocks, the first name from here, so sorry, that's surname, first name. So the first by the surname, so that's blocks and Smith are the two surnames. And then inside blocks there is the Fred and George, and then inside of Fred there are the two entries of Fred and containing the whole thing. It can be useful. There are many cases when we have one kind of a data structure and then we would like to convert it to a different data structure because it's going to be easier for lookup. So maybe you're reading this in from a CSV file or something like this, and first name and surname being the headers, and that's what you get, and then but you would like to look it up in a different way. And actually I think I even have an exercise exactly like this in my course. So that's fine. Okay. Now what you can see here also, that there was one hash reference that didn't have the first name and the surname, and it was created as an empty string, being the keys in both cases. And that's fine. You can actually provide a default, and there is actually a bug here in the slide, but it was fixed since then. It's just not updated on the website yet. So you can say that the default, the surname key is going to be blocks. Let's assume that now it's capital B. So it's going to be included in the blocks family in this case. Okay. Again, this is supposed to be capital B in order for this to work, get the result as it's being printed on the screen. And then you can also say another thing here. So we have the keys, you have the defaults, and you can have some operation on a conversion operation. For example, this converts all the strings to uppercase. So that's basically what the module does. And what I'm interested in here is both reading the source code of this module and seeing how it's being tested, because these are the two interesting things. The first, so if we keep looking at the, I can scroll down further and see that basically these are the options. Okay, so the synopsis shows basically all the possible options to run this program. You can see that the coverage report is pretty nice. We can actually click through and see what is the report, what is missing, the little that it's missing. So you can see that there are some conditions that are not fully covered, okay, in the tests. Here we can see, we can go to the repository. So I can click on to this repository. Actually, it's being in GitLab. I actually already cloned it, so it's on my computer. Git remote -v. It's here, cloned from there. Okay. But I can go on and read the source code at this point. So what we have here is minimum requirements Perl 5.10. As I see, it's using the double slash operator, which is a defined OR operator. So instead of having the two pipelines, that would be just a regular OR that could behave incorrectly if on the left hand side is 0. It would still get the default, but this defined OR gets you the only gives you the default value if the left side is undef. Strict warnings, okay, version number, it's exporting this function, the GroupBy function, and it's using carp to provide better error messages. It accepts, so this is something that's a little bit strange to me, it accepts a scalar and an array, which means that because it's accepting an array, we could actually see this in this example, that it gets copied the whole thing instead of giving a reference to this array. So I'm not sure that this is a good idea, because if it's a big array, it's a long list, then it will copy all the data. In our case, it will copy all the data to the function. Also the same that it returns the data as a copy instead of returning a reference. So both could be improved speed-wise, if it's even relevant. I'm not sure. I'm sure that this is more convenient in most cases, passing through the list and getting back the actual hash. So the user doesn't have to know much about references. Well, actually, doesn't really matter, because I mean at this point I already see that the user of this function has to understand a little bit about references. So I don't know. Okay, so back to the code. The first thing is that it's checking whether the options is a reference to an array or not. So we see two cases here. One case when we have the first parameter is a reference to an array, and in another case where the first parameter is a hash, is a reference to a hash, and inside there are the various options. So basically this is like the more generic one, when you provide a reference to a hash. But if you only want to provide the keys, then you can do it this way. It makes it a little bit nicer. I'm not sure if it's worth the effort and slight ambiguity how it's being called. But this is what it does. So if it's an array, so if it was given in the shorter way, okay, then it automatically converts it into a reference to a hash, where we have the keys is the key, okay, and the options, whatever we got here, so that reference of the array is the value. So this is converting this single thing into a hash like this, of course without the defaults. So that's it. And if it's not a reference to an array, then we just use the same options. Okay, so that's first thing. Then we call here, or the code calls here croak, which is like die. It's raising an exception. Croak, sorry, no, it's warning. What is croak? I forgot. Okay, Perl doc carp. So croak is die of errors. Okay, so it's like die, except that it will give you not the line of code, not this line of code, but the line of code where you call this function, which is much more useful because if the problem is not here, the problem is that the user didn't provide the right information. So the problem is where the function is being called. Okay, so that's why croak is better, and it's taken from carp. Okay, clicked on it. I didn't have to. Okay, and this happens if and I almost never use unless. I always have to translate it to if not, in my head at least. So unless or I would just use negative comparison here. So I would say croak if the reference is not an array, not a reference to if it's not a reference to an array. Okay. Right, so it's using, it doesn't check if there is a keys element. So it might be that the options, the reference to the hash, doesn't even provide a keys field. It can happen not in the default, not in the array case, because now we are creating, but it's in but in the other case, okay, when we already provide a hash. Then we get the keys, converting the reference to the array into an array, and we set the defaults to the empty hash. So if there are defaults, then it's okay. If not, then set it to empty hash, and then we check if the whatever. I keep saying we, so it's like a plural of, I don't know. Nice. Anyway, default is going to be this default, and we're checking it if it's a reference to a hash, and so on. And here is the code that another checking the operations, the same thing. So it defaults to. Interestingly, it in this case it doesn't have a separate variable called operations for some reason. Here we have a separate variable called the defaults. Interesting, the difference. Okay, the same checking whether it's hash. Then we get, I guess this is operations. So here we have the operations, and there was a nope here. So this nope is basically return. So it's a subroutine. It's a reference to a subroutine. Okay, and to an anonymous subroutine that returns the first parameter that it got. So basically, it's a transformation that doesn't do anything, right? It just returns the first parameter. So this is, so here we're going to have operations. So let me see the operations. So the operation would be, there was an operation. There's an operation. So an operation would be a key value pair where the key is on which field to work. And the operation is a function that gets a single value, the value, that's the surname, and does some transformation on it and returns that transformation. So the default is just to return the same string. So this is operations defined should be an anonymous subroutine unless, okay, so that's checking if it's an anonymous subroutine. And the dollar underscore here is the values from the keys. Okay, so it's all the keys that. So it's basically checking for each one of the keys. Okay, each one of the keys we have, it maps the operation. So because there was no operation for first name here, it will get the default operation, right? Okay, it goes over all the keys, surname and first name, and for each one of them inserts in this hash a key value pair where the key is the surname or surname, so first name, so one of the keys there, and the value is the operation, which is either the one that's provided by the user or this no operation nope, which just returns the same value. The nice thing, I think. Okay, so that's the mapping hash. Then there are the groupings. So we pop out the keys. This is the leaf key. Okay, so this is like the root. Okay, that's it's being called leaf, but for me it looks like this is the root of the hash. And we go over all the list. So this is called list. This is the input basically, item by item. Get the groupings. What is groupings? Okay, this is groupings. So this is the hash where we're going to put all the. So this is what we are returning, and this is also interesting because the code collects everything into a reference to a hash and then converts it back to a hash and returns that instead of returning the reference to the hash. I'm not sure. It might be easier for the user to see that way, but it's on larger data structures it's going to be slower. Okay. So here that's gonna be interesting here, the reading. I'm not even sure that I will be able to read this, so maybe I'll leave it for you and switch to the testing part now. Okay, maybe I'll come back to see, and at the end I'll try to figure it out. For now, let's go to the testing. Okay, so here I can click on the browse link and it will show me basically the directory structure of this. First of all, I note that it has it's used Minilla. Okay, so the meta cpan pod Minilla, in case you're not familiar, is like a mini Distzilla or something like that. So it's a tool to package cpan modules. Everything is automatic. You don't have to think about it like this. Okay, some calculations here. I never really used it, so I never used it just now, trying it. Okay, so here it is. So this is the configuration file. You don't have the list of dependencies, nothing. Okay, just the basic information that couldn't be retrieved from other places. So it's gonna be automatically creating things. But it's strange to me that there is also a build PL here. But this file is automatically generated, so I would not include this into the. Wait a second, this can be included here and okay. So that's interesting. So the fact that it's included in the distribution, that's in order to make it easy to install. So the installer won't need to have Minilla installed. But maybe the cpan m and all the other tools you are using now, cpan file, no, I guess they are using the build PL. But what I noticed here that in the Git repository, it also includes the build PLs, and that's what I started to say, that I would not recommend. I think in general it's not recommended to include in the version control a file that is being generated. I guess at release time, Minilla will generate this file again and then again. Now in this case it's not a big issue because I guess the file will stay exactly the same, so not an issue. But I probably would not recommend. Maybe the recommendation of Minilla is to include it build PL in the version control because it's not changing and because it might make it easier for people who would like to contribute to the project to run it instead of installing Minilla itself. Okay, so that might be the recommendation, I don't know. The other thing that I noticed is that the meta JSON is here, and I noticed it because, and it's included in the version control. I wouldn't do that either because it's changing, and that's how I noticed it actually. So I ran here Minilla test, that's basically the command. Okay, after I installed Minilla, and it runs the test, and I think if I run git status now, then you can say that the meta JSON was changed. Git diff, why? Because it's a different version of some modules. Okay, that's the whole thing. But and therefore I wouldn't recommend to include this in the version control. It will be generated automatically and will be included in the distribution. So now I have to git status git checkout the meta JSON, so to reset it to what I wanted. But this is how you run the test. So I just ran the test, Minilla test, and it ran all the tests. The other thing I wanted to show is the test coverage here. So I didn't know exactly how to run the test coverage using Devel cover. So this is what I wanted to use. Let me show you. Meta cpan pod Devel cover in order to get the coverage report myself. The one that we also saw in here when I clicked on the coverage report. But you can also generate it yourself. And it can be, of course, useful maybe to include it into the CI system to generate it and push it to some place where it collects it and reports the changes in coverage. So I didn't know exactly how to run it. Finally, I found that I can run this way. So I can copy paste this line and then prove -L will okay, Minilla, it ran for, okay, no, without the make, sorry. Yeah, Okay, I was confused a little for a second, but it's just my typo. So this is it's running the test while coverage is enabled. Then I can run the cover command as suggested in the documentation of Devel cover here. Okay, I didn't need to run this one because this was the first time I ran this cover. And here is the same report, or more or less the same. Well, is the report for the most recent version of the code. And here you can see that this is the report here. Okay, looks slightly different than the one in the website. So how do the tests look? Right, in which window? Not this one, this one. The tests. So there is the compile test, which is not very interesting because it only uses the use OK and checks whether you can even load the module. I think I've heard that people not really recommend this anymore because if the module can't be loaded, then this test will just die, and that's it. So this is the real test. Here the module is imported, and the function is imported. This is basically the same example as we have in the synopsis, and you have subtests. Okay, and then two main things that I noticed. So one of them is that using CMP deeply, the compare deeply from test deep, but actually it's not needed. You could use just is deeply in this case. Compare deeply is for cases where you have you want to have more flexibility. Maybe some leaves you don't want to match because they are, let's say, random numbers, so you can't really compare exactly, or maybe you don't need to. You are comparing two arrays, but you actually don't care about the order inside the array, and things like this. Then compare deeply is important. But now in this case, all of the examples are fixed expectations, so we don't actually need the compare deeply. And how do I know this? I can just CMP deep. Oops, what did I do? Compare deeply into with is deeply. I just replace it, and I can even comment out this module or remove it. I don't need it, and still I can run Minilla test and it will still be passing. Okay, so that's one thing that you don't need this. But let's see the other part. But this is basically it. So it's taking this data structure, calling it with the various ways that you can also see in the synopsis, and assigning it to some variable, and then compare deeply or is deeply, checking that the reference to that data structure to the expected data structure. Okay. Here is the same, just with some different parameters. And again the same, and all of them are inside the subtests. And one more interesting thing here, and this is basically how I found originally the module, that I was looking for modules that were using test exception. So test exception, and this is here. Let me go back to the code for a second. So the question is, how do we test that these exceptions happen when the user doesn't pass the correct data? And this is how it can be tested. That throws OK, calling the GroupBy, for example, in this case, just GroupBy and the list, without providing the grouping keys. And then this is the exception that is expected. So we call the throws OK function from the test exception. We call it we provide the pair of curly braces inside whatever code we have, and then we compare it to some regular expression, checking that indeed there was an exception that was raised. So these are expected exceptions, and there are a couple of more of these here, and I guess there are a few that are missing, and that's why the coverage report is not 100%. So that's probably they go together, and at the end there is done testing. So that's it basically. Let me get back to this here already. I spent already 24 minutes, so way longer than I planned originally. Basically here, let's try to understand this one. So we go over the keys, which doesn't include the first key. Okay, remember the first key was removed. So we go over the other keys, and then and this is in like a deep level. So it goes in, deeper and deeper, I guess, because the current is always pointing. So it starts with the grouping, and then it changes to some other place. Wow, impressive code here. I won't go into this now. It's a little bit more than I was prepared for this video. So anyway, I hope that this video you like this video. Maybe it was a little too long. I'm going to try to make shorter ones with the same idea of going over reading some source code, looking at some tests of some module. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and whatever. So see you. Bye bye.